Woo! But that was that. That was the update. We'll go listen to the Q&A. Get a drink and then log in on some Exile here.
G'day, ZiggyD here, folks. Exile's
Hey!
welcome for a giant jam-packed Q&A after a huge reveal session.
That was
we have here
amazing.
today Chris, Jonathan, and
that's not my
Mark.
Discord. I was like,
3 for the price of 1 this time around, not just Chris. Welcome, folks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Excellent, folks. We're going to be moving through things in rough order that we saw things today during the reveal. So starting with Path of Exile 2 and then moving through some of the new Path of Exile 1 features. So get those questions in through Twitch chat and we'll sprinkle those in through each of those various sections. So first, let's talk about that new movement scheme that was revealed with the new mercenary class. So we have the new WASD movement. And does this alternate control scheme work with other classes and builds, or is it mainly intended for like this shooter mercenary style?
So when we put it in, I was totally thinking that it was going to be something that you'd want to use with ranged characters way more. But actually, when I tried out some melee stuff, I was pretty sold on it, actually. It was better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
There's still a few tweaks to do to make that perfect internally, but like, yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I think I'm probably I think I'm going to be playing that way myself, actually, even though I was a bit of a skeptic at first of WASD.
It was Jonathan. He didn't want
WASD. But we want to make sure that everyone understands that you can change from one to the other.
I knew it.
It's just one of those things that, like some people may prefer it, some people may not. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. WASD rather feels pretty good to me.
Feels good, man.
Surprised, to be honest. Like I've die-hard action RPG Diablo 2 era kind of guy myself, but for some reason the WASD stuff just feels really natural to play. I guess it's
feels good, man.
Crimson Land and that kind of thing.
Yeah. That first moment you use it, it's a little bit jarring because W is now not a skill, but once you can get beyond that, it is like very, very fun to play.
It is actually funny going I went loaded up the PoE1 client again recently, and like I was immediately pressing WSD like, oh shit.
Yeah. He's like, fuck, I can't use it on here.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also keep trying to dodge roll as well.
Yeah, so yeah.
I had that same problem. I was going to ask it then, can WASD movement be added to Path of Exile 1, or is it exclusively a PoE2 feature?
It's probably going to be pretty hard to add it to PoE1, and the reason would be because the number of animations you need to support like arbitrary directional movement like that is really high, and the rigs in PoE1 are so old,
and they're not
that
have
it
the
would
fidelity.
be really difficult to add. So I think it's probably like quite unlikely.
They have to make the bases from the ground up.
PoE2, like it's just a different level. So it was like okay, I'm not going to say easy, but it was easier to add it in PoE2 than it
because they're building the base.
PoE1 by far. So yeah, for now I'd say it's going to be PoE2 only.
How have you found hotkey usage and things like that while moving around with WSD movement?
So basically, one thing it does do is so it's definitely a thing. But what personally what I found is that so you've effectively got the left click freed up, to put a skill on. So you've kind of got you can have sort of 3 major skills on mouse, and then having other stuff on the keyboard, and it works pretty well for me because the stuff that I put on the keyboard at least tends to be the sort of more rarely used stuff. They're still like commonly used, but still a bit rarer.
It's usually your mouse.
So it wasn't too bad. I found it okay. It is a concern for sure. Like I suspect that there might be a few builds that would be a bit harder to do that way, but you can always use the other control scheme if you want. But it's working really well for what we were doing there.
And how well does this translate to controllers then? You would think it'd be perfect for twin sticks.
It is. So we have also implemented so that the right stick you can use to aim which direction that you're going in on controller, and it does work well there. There's like a bunch of other controller stuff that we've kind of been fiddling around with trying to get that better. It definitely does help in that direction as well. Plus, it just kind of makes movement. Like there's actually stuff even with click to move that we can use. Like we can utilize the fact that we've got the ability for the character to face a different way than they're walking. That actually makes there's some cases where we can make the click to move stuff look more natural as well. It's kind of minor stuff, but the animation does look actually better for click to move too due to that.
And what sort of skills can you use when moving? That was mentioned that some will be kind of like functional in that way.
Yeah, so we're still going through and thinking exactly what we want to do there. But the basic thing is that you definitely want to have, I think, for each build, a few skills that you can use in that way, because it does make combat feel faster when you can kind of be doing stuff on the way to the next monster, this kind of thing. It just kind of improves it in a way that once we tried it, we were just like, wow, that's actually really cool. Yeah, it won't be like everything, or like a lot of the time. I think what we're doing is getting the like we can shorten the windows because we've got this ability now. We can kind of shorten the windows where you're not allowed to move, where there's like movement locked out in skills as well. So like only like right near the contact point do you actually have to stop. And then for other skills we can do them completely while you're moving. So you know, like some of the skills that you might want to spam in some cases, things like that, it can be okay. So I'm not going to like give you a list or anything, but yeah, we definitely want to have making sure that each build has skills that you can do while moving available, so that you can kind of utilize the time when moving between packs to be.
Skills that incorporate more movement or even play with the lack of
Should be
movement, like
user
planting your feet.
What was
What's that, sorry?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I think Discord kind of lagged out for a
They
second
have-
there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the other thing as well is that is another question people have asked is like how does it work when you are using click to move? And the answer is honestly pretty simple. Like you click where you want to move, and then you move the mouse and use the skill in the other direction, and then your character will just not be interrupted the move. They'll just keep moving while you shoot in the other direction. That does work. Like it is technically like, I mean, it takes a bit more mouse movement to be able to do it if you want to be able to move while you're doing it, but it does work. So there's no technical disadvantage there other than just, I mean, effectively what you're doing is it's like what the same exact motion you do if you're stutter stepping, except that you're able to actually move at the same time while you're doing it, basically.
Yeah, you effectively like queue up a move command and then fire in the opposite direction or something.
Exactly.
Log in.
Do you find that this
APM.
is... What's that?
I was saying it's like lower APM stutter stepping.
Yeah.
Do you find that this is like opening up a lot new design space for you with skills then? Because this is like a new way of thinking that you haven't really had access to in terms of skill design now.
For sure. There's definitely a lot of stuff. Like we haven't even really yet explored all the repercussions on other builds as much as we would like to yet. Like there's a lot of stuff to change here and kind of and utilize that stuff for. But yeah, as I said, once we tried it, it's just like, yeah, we need to be exploring this all throughout what we're doing and making sure that we can take advantage of it so it feels as natural as possible when you've got like direct character control like that.
What we're finding here is the overarching goal with the new characters in Path of Exile 2 is that each one plays entirely differently. We're releasing 12 games in one, where you can play an entirely different style with each character and feel compelled. Now that you've tried a mercenary, you want to try another one, for example, because you're going to get a different experience. And this means that Jonathan's team is pioneering these new things like the WSD controls, using a class as an example. Like the mercenary is the canonical WSD control one because of the crossbow stuff feeling like a gun. And then the fallout from that, of course, is then it benefits all the other 11 classes and millions of different playstyles, and that kind of goes through afterwards.
Because everybody can now use WSD.
Those classes.
Yeah. At the risk of going like off topic a little bit, I already noticed in previous reveals that like the melee stuff is getting a lot more fluid with a lot more movement and stuff like that. But a lot of that was a kind of pre-scripted but modifiable movement after the fact, where you could like whirl and then change direction a little bit like that. But it seems like now even you might even be able to have things like where your character's able to do a cleave while taking a couple extra steps, just little things like that. So it seems like it's going to change gameplay a lot from Path of Exile 1 to 2.
I think it can, but we do have to be careful. Like, I don't want the feeling of just complete floatiness. Like we don't want, like I wouldn't want it so that every skill you can just do without like while moving arbitrarily. Like it needs to still feel like there's at least some amount of the animation where you're kind of like locked into that little bit. So for something like cleave, for example, what I do is I'd have it so you can kind of step into it, and then you can move really quickly after the slap. The actual slap itself, you need a bit of that sort of like locked in, just so that you got something going on there, because otherwise it'll just feel like you kind of don't really exist. You're just like floating around, kind of not really.
You're just shooting superpowers.
So it's a little bit vague, but effectively, I just want to avoid the kind of feeling where where you don't feel like you're a real character in the world, which you can get if you just allow full unrestricted. Like if you do absolutely everything while moving and there was no slowdowns or anything, then it would feel real floaty, and I don't like that either. So it can be a little bit of an interesting one. You have to really look at the feel of every single skill and kind of get the timing windows exactly right for everything to be able to make it actually feel really.
Oh damn! The Q&A went on for a minute.
But if we're doing our job right, then every class should have quite a distinct feel as far as all that stuff goes.
Like I get what you mean. Like once you have more movement, that's when you can start playing with like, okay, in what situations do we stop movement? Like I noticed with the crossbow, for example, the character planted their feet for the shotgun shots especially, and that made that look and feel a lot more impactful. So that seems like a design there.
Exactly.
Perfect. On that note, then let's talk a bit about the crossbows. It seems they've changed quite a bit since the original reveal with the armor
Yes.
piercing bolts and whatnot.
Yep, they have. Yep, that was that meme. Is no longer applicable, hopefully. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the split to all of the classes happened after that last the last reveal, and so then we were kind of like, we need to make sure that we're making like I didn't. Even like there were like the mechanical ideas of like having ammos and stuff like that for the crossbows before, but I don't think we'd quite yet nailed the kind of like, how is a crossbow actually going to feel really different to play than a bow. And it wasn't until I sort of made the observation that, hey, like if we're like a crossbow, like if you pull the trigger on a crossbow, it needs to fire instantly. We should be putting the contact point literally at 0 on the animation. So this is a bit of a technical term. Like contact point just means
as soon as you
point
touch
where
it.
the damage happens, et cetera, et cetera. We need to move that right to the start. And if we do that, like what kind of things, would need to change? And we actually found there was like a grab bag. Like as soon as we did that, there's like a grab bag of issues that we off topic, but it's like the amount of engine brokenness that the mercenary brought to the front was so high. Like the amount of things like that we had to fix in order to make the mercenary work in the engine was just ridiculous. Like I found so many bugs. I mean, these are all going to be fixed, by the way, in PoE 1 as well, because the engine is shared. But it's like I found out that projectiles like disappear a frame before they arrive at the destination, and they appear 1 frame late after they leave your character as well. And that it turns out all objects when they're created appear 33 milliseconds late from when they actually render. And like there was
holy shit!
Like, it was just actually
he's learning all the secrets.
When you're dealing with something like this, like if you've got like a bullet effectively traveling ultra fast, it has to happen instantly as soon as you click, and like all these things. There was like so many engine things where it's like we're speeding all this shit up, and like the engines just started breaking all over the place. So yeah, there was a lot of technical improvements that had to happen in order to make that stuff work. Not to even mention the whole like WSD and all the animation system stuff, and yeah, like it was pretty crazy. So I'm really glad to remove a lot of jank that existed that we hadn't noticed before, because things weren't fast enough to see the problems. And there was a lot of like frame by framing it and like making sure that every single frame is perfect and all that sort of stuff going on. And
That's
yeah,
crazy.
It was pretty crazy during the development of this stuff.
I love to hear how that pans out in terms of improvements.
Sure.
Damn.
So on the crossbows, I noticed that they have the new like skill bound to the weapon thing where they fire differently. So you have your shotgun crossbow and you have your semi-automatic crossbow or whatever. Are we mostly going to be modifying those primary skills, or are there going to be other primary separate skills or just kind of more ammo types that modify the base skills?
So there's definitely going to be more ammo types. There will be other skills, but what we did to sort of solve, as it were, the crossbow, like having crossbow skills that aren't tied to the primary firing type, was to have the attachments. And so those basically are effectively skill gems, except that you equip them where you'd equip a quiver instead. But they have support gems and everything like that. And effectively, whenever we want to have a crossbow skill, as it were, that isn't related to one of those primary firing types, then that'll be where that can go. And so there's way more than what we even showed there. Like we just showed like some grenades, but there's all sorts of other quirky types that have been come up with that you can attach to your crossbow. Like I know someone made like a bayonet at one point. I'm not sure how we're going to use that, but I don't know if that one will actually be useful. But we'll see. We've got a model for it. We'll see if we'll experiment with it. But there's those. But I mean, there's also other things. Of course, like the stuff we can show here. Like there's still the what do you call them? The the crossbows that pop up when you summon the totem. Ballista totems. There's still ballista totems and other things like that, and like various other skills. So there's definitely other skills that we expect this class to use, but we kind of ran out of like time to be able to show like all.
That was a lot of shit.
And we'll show more of those later. But yeah, there's going to be other stuff that you can fill your skill slots with for sure.
That was great.
So don't worry about that.
So are some bow skills going to become crossbow skills? Is there going to be shared across the two?
There are certainly some concepts that we might. When we're designing the classes, we're kind of like, we do look at PoE 1 and be like, is there anything here that we want to crib from, to kind of to use? And there might have been a couple of things that we've like sort of used as concepts, but overall it is supposed to feel like this is distinct. And I'm sure maybe there'll be a time where like this is better suited as a crossbow skill than a bow skill. But in general, I guess like we're looking at designing things like this is a full new game. Like we're designing skills again.
Like new classes.
There will be cases where we go back and we're like, hey, this PoE 1 skill is still great. Let's port it over. But in almost all cases, the skills get changed a lot. Like, I mean, when you saw the sorceress, when we announced all the stuff there, it's like, yeah, there were skills from PoE 1, but like the changes to them were such that like they don't really feel the same at all. So, you know, they kind of end up quite different.
Yeah, I feel like I remember seeing like a melee skill became a spell or something like that.
Sure,
Some pretty big
all sorts of
changes.
weird stuff can happen. Yeah.
He said weird stuff.
So are the crossbows exclusive to the mercenary, or are they something anyone can use?
I mean, just like anything in PoE, everyone can always use everything. I mean, we obviously, when we're showing stuff, we sort of show it as if like, you know, this is a thing restricted to this class, something, but it isn't, of course.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can use it anywhere. And one thing we definitely try to do is make sure that there are keywords that are usable between the classes to make sure, like, even if we don't know exactly how that'll be useful, like that they can lead to things that can be interesting. So, for example, on the crossbow there, we had armor break being used, which is the same mechanic we were using on the warrior. And I mean, look, maybe in theory someone could make a crossbow / mace
Warrior.
build.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work, but what I'm
You
saying is,
shoot
like,
him,
by
break
having these
armor,
shared
and then you
keywords across
slap
different
him in the
classes, it just
face.
means that if someone wants to come up with something weird,
Yeah.
you know, they can do that. So yeah, absolutely, you can use stuff across.
I'm
just-
definitely going to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm definitely going to do
Swing for the
armor
fences,
piercing
baby.
bolt, crossbow, and then
F.
always crit. It's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah, I mean that's probably pretty broken actually as
Yes,
the balance
it
stands
is.
right now. I bet
It
it's
is.
actually like real
Yes,
broken.
it is right now.
Yeah.
Tell me what was
With,
broken.
it seems like Discord died for the stream a little bit there. Sorry,
Okay.
Jonathan, what did you say you Mark, what did you say you were going to do?
Oh, it's using armor piercing bolts to get armor break from a distance, and then using sunder which is a skill we showed on the warrior, because sunder gets always crit and higher crit damage
if the target's
if the target's armor broken. So
You break the
when
armor.
we showed
See,
the warrior,
I
you have
literally
to use,
just said that.
armor break, which is I guess kind of heavy strike esque.
Yeah.
You know, right in the face to break the armor. But now I'll just do it from a distance and then sunder
Yeah,
from a distance.
bam!
And
So yeah,
you
there's
know.
potential. There's a potential build there, for sure.
We've got the weapons swapping and the tree swapping and stuff. I
Yeah,
hope we see
it
some
works.
hybrid melee ranged. It's a
Yeah,
great
it can happen.
playstyle.
It
Yeah.
can happen.
Especially for the mercenary, I feel it'd be a great fit. But moving on a little bit, we've got the oil grenade, and that effectively showed some environmental interactions, lighting a patch of oil on the ground on fire. Is that something you might expand to with other skills, enemy abilities, or even like combat areas? Like, here's an oil barrel, you can light that on fire or something.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely love that stuff, like the environmental stuff. But I mean, even with the other skills we're designing, like, I mean, things like the volcano interaction with
Yeah.
the druid, that's another example of that kind of like
They're
place
so
a thing in the world and
excited
then
about
you
that.
can do something with it. I quite like that stuff.
He
I think that's
loves
pretty
it.
cool.
Look at his face. He
So,
lit
yeah,
up.
I absolutely want to be doing more of that. I mean, and the more I guess state you can add to get a bit technical about it to the world, where it's like, you know, placing a thing like, you know, like all that stuff allows you to do more setting up for something you're going to do afterwards, which I think is a big part of being able to do combos and things like that. So yeah, like I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff.
We
Poggers.
do have monsters integrating with that as well. Like we have, to give a couple examples, we have explosive barrels with lines of gunpowder, and the lines are randomly generated, and then you have monsters with torches that will run up and set them on fire.
Yeah.
And we've got another one as well that throws, it's like more of an alchemist monster, and it throws two types of, I guess, flasks or concoctions. And one creates ground type A and one creates ground type B, and if they mix, they end up creating a new
Exploding?
type of ground type and exploding and doing massive AoE damage, like just
Is
chemical
that real?
reactions.
Yeah.
Is that
Coming up
real?
with a whole alchemy system for your
Yeah,
Chris is like,
environmental
what?
reactions.
It's got, we
Chris is like,
tried
"The
it in
fuck?"
Heist Surprise. I don't know if anyone even in PoE 1 notices this, but there is oil there that does catch on fire. It just doesn't look anywhere near as good. Just because like where the art is and where the effects is now for PoE 2 is just allowing things to look incredible.
Similarly, we're seeing like more and more powerful control and utility effects. Like, for example, in this clip, we saw the shots placing ice walls, and
Yeah.
they were like blocking and taunting enemies. I noticed, it seemed.
Mhm.
How do you keep these sorts of effects like feeling powerful and relevant in boss fights without just kind of breaking the fight or trivializing them?
I mean, on some level, like we have to be able to let players use those tools in boss fights because otherwise there's no point in them. Like I really want it to be the kind of game where you can use that kind of more control type stuff. And I mean, like it's funny because a lot of the designers, when we talk to them, we're like, "Hey, we should allow this," and they're like, "Oh my god, it's crazy because you know, like it's going to be way too easy." Like, and then Mark will look at it and he goes, "It's not that broken. It's not that broken." It's like you look at some of the stuff you can do in PoE 1, and I'm
It's
like,
it's not that broken.
the ability to like freeze people in place with walls is like nothing compared to like the ridiculousness that your character can get to. So yeah, like when you actually think about it, like it's not that broken really. I mean, and we want players to have fun at the end of the day, right? We want them to be able to use those tools, and I quite enjoy
It's
it.
not that broken,
In particular,
guys.
though, with the ice though, those walls, once a monster gets above a certain size, they no longer get blocked by them, and they run through them. They still get
Ooh.
they explode. So Ursea, you might have noticed, like the baby wasn't able to get through the walls, but Ursea can
Yeah,
run
she
through
just
them,
walked
and then they
right
just get
through
that
that
little,
bitch.
detonation. So the skill actually changes a bit. Like against small monsters, they have to like stop and attack. It completely blocks them in, and they can't get through. But against large monsters, the monster rolls right through it, but then they explode and get chilled. So it kind of changes the function a little bit for boss versus the small monsters, and so that's why that particular skill I think is actually fine in that regard. So yeah, there's little tricks like that we can do, and I think I honestly really enjoy the stuff we're doing with monster size, which was never a factor in PoE 1 design. Like monster size means that we can say, okay, like bigger, like this happens to large monsters. I mean, it all makes some kind of physical sense on some level. The bigger monsters can have this happen, smaller monsters have that happen, and that can kind of allow you a bit more control in that way as well.
Cool.
Does this give you, Mark, some interesting tools to play with when designing bosses?
Yeah, I mean, generally, yes. I've had rants about this before. I love the I love the object size. I like things pushing you around, and I like that
Yeah.
a small monster can't and a large monster can, and like things like the knockback and just the thing feeling very physical and as it would, I guess, in real life, is quite important to me, and it makes the game feel just way more grounded. Like you're actually in there and it makes sense, as opposed to, I mean, that's something about the mercenary as well. I know this is tangential, but I'll just get into it. Like when, I don't know if people notice, but when you fire at a monster on the ground, like that area had babies in it, the crossbow aims down and shoots down.
Yes,
Like
that was a change that was also absolutely needed.
whereas in PoE 1 and like if there's a little like the little insects, for example, down there, you'll fire your bow and the arrow will just go this and hit it, and it's like it doesn't feel right. Now you may wonder, okay, well, how can it pierce if it aims down? And the answer is it can't. But
I mean,
you
it
know.
does a bit because like you still
well, yeah,
get
sure,
the thing.
it goes through and then hits the ground, but like it does change the gameplay in an interesting way, but it also makes it feel way more realistic, and you're not just like shooting the air.
Yeah. One thing you didn't see in the demo, but actually like now the collision geometry for everything is actually modeled correctly to the to everything, even the stuff outside the gameplay space. So you can fire a grenade out over the buildings and like it'll hit the roofs and like bounce down on the roofs and like go down to the lower story and that sort of stuff. Like it actually has like all of that physics all working.
The full
Even those
collision.
problems in PoE 1 with like leap slam, where you leap slam off like over a ravine, your character will go down, up, down.
Yeah.
No more of that. No more.
Yeah, so like we've got
Get
lots
rid
of
of all of
yeah,
that.
yeah. Like there's a lot of physical stuff. In fact, like and also just things
You
like
can't
arrows
sleep slam
hitting, like,
shortcut?
empty space and like stuff like that. Like now they all exactly hit the geometry and like there's lots of there's I mean once again it comes back to all the engine stuff we had to fix in order to make the mercenary possible. Like it was just like we were like, okay, we can no longer tolerate all of this like not physical stuff anymore. We have to actually make it right. So yeah,
This
there
is
was
no
a
longer
lot of
ignorable.
changes required. And it makes just everything feel a lot more realistic and
That's
kinda grounded,
good
so it's
though.
One of the reasons why the groundedness
Feels
matters
good,
here is
man.
because one of the factors that varies from fight to fight is the terrain you're fighting in. And so if you can interact with the shape of that terrain in a different way and it actually has an
Sure.
impact, it will make the fights feel different.
I like how it affects the monsters too, because instead of just shooting at a wall when you're up on an elevation, they'll actually like pathfind backwards to try and get a line of sight to you with their projectile.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Which is
Because
kind of interesting. Yeah.
they take into account height in the pathfinding now,
Yeah.
so they actually have to find like a line of sight to you, up a cliff and this kind of thing. Like there's some pretty interesting things.
Wow, very cool.
That's
so for
exciting.
demonstrations and things like demos and stuff, you're obviously going to be showing off as many different abilities and combos and stuff like that as possible, like more than you typically have on an actual character. But I'm curious then, kind of what are your expectations or hopes for PoE 2 in terms of how many skills and combos a well-refined character build is going to be running at endgame?
I mean, I personally believe that you should have probably 2 to 3.
Core?
2 is going to be very common. I think 3 will be pretty common as well in terms of like core combos for your character. And then depending on the context, like what's going on with the boss fight or just the monsters,
Supportive.
you'll decide to do one or the other. But what I quite like about the way the gameplay is and what we try to strive for is like you've got some plan in mind for what you're doing, but like no plan survives contact with the enemy kind of thing, and like the enemies are doing things that's kind of disrupting that, and then you're like, oh, I should need to use this skill to kind of like deal with that. And so that a lot of the time you can have like I think you saw this on the druid as well. It's like the druid basically had synergy for the entire set of skills that it had, but in reality when you're playing, it's like you can't kind of get off the full combo all the time. You need to kind of like, sometimes you can, and then you get a huge amount of damage, but the rest of the time you're kind of using individual sub parts of the combo that like
you're chasing
multiple
it.
parts of it still work together.
You're
So you can
chasing the
still sort
combo.
of have, like utilizing different parts of it is still useful in different situations, but then you can kind of use everything together in one go in the end and kind of get something really awesome. Like different characters will feel a bit different in this regard, but I really do want like some like interesting combos going on, and it should be very context sensitive, right? Like what the enemies are doing should matter in what you are doing. Like that is, I guess, the sort of key element of that. And in order to achieve that, you're going to want to have like a few different options on your character to take care of different situations.
Before we move on to some Path of
Ooh.
Exile 1 and Affliction questions, we have a couple more chat questions to ask.
Sure.
Do you need to spend all the crossbow ammo to reload, or can you reload manually as well? Is there like a hotkey or something for that?
Yeah, you can reload manually. So effectively, if you use the ammo skill again, it'll reload the thing. So there is a reload.
Great. Will Path of Exile 2 be cross-platform at all?
Yes, it will be.
To
Absolutely.
who? To who?
Will boss and monster balancing be done around
Xbox?
WASD movement
PlayStation?
balancing, or will be keeping mouse movement players in mind as well?
I mean, we're always going to make sure that it's okay for both type of players, but I wouldn't say that the balancing has to be hugely different, honestly. Like, especially with the dodge roll and everything, you can get where you need to go with click to move as well. It's just that the immediacy of WASD just sort of feels better, or
F.
like I think that
small F.
I don't think there's necessarily a huge balancing task there, but maybe Mark, you've got a different feeling.
No,
Oh,
it's ultimately the same.
Yeah.
But there's some tiny things like to give a real picky example, it's like when you click to move, you pathfind, right?
Mhm.
And with WASD,
It is technically pathfinding a little bit, but it's
a bit less, and so like you're more likely to run into a where if you were to click around something, your character would path around it, but if there was
Yep.
like a point, your character might run into that and get stuck because you
You're-
actually have to navigate around yourself.
it does pathfind on WASD. Though.
Yes,
Yeah.
but there's a couple
Does
cases
it?
like that, but that's not really balance. It's more like we have to. I mean, yeah, you're running into a dead end. It's your
I
fault,
would
but-
say though that, like, for example, the bag. I don't know what the name of the monster we eventually went with, but the bag ladies. I don't know, in that area, I did find them a bit easier to dodge with WSD because you can like take a step back really easily when you're fighting them. When they get up close. There are things like that like are a little bit easier. Whereas with the click to move, like you're less inclined to because you'd have to move the mouse to the other side of the character to kind of be able to do that.
Yeah, no, so you
or else
just
dodge
tank
roll,
it.
it takes a bit longer. So there are like
Yeah.
a few cases
You're
there.
just
where
like,
it's
"Hi-ya!"
like you get a bit more control there, but it's still
But
fine.
yeah, ultimately, there's not a lot you need to change balance wise.
Right.
Poggers.
Well,
All
pretty much
right.
nothing.
So will we be seeing a bit more for from PoE 2 between now and the beta then?
Of course, well, I mean, at the very least, there'll be, the next league live stream and everything. We'll definitely want to have some stuff to show then. But as we get
Great.
towards the beta, we're going to be showing a heck of a lot more. And I also want to make sure that we get I want to do a deep dive like this for every character class. So that we can sort of see what to expect. And I think there are also good references for the type of gameplay that a player like in terms of like when you're picking a class, like what class do I want to pick? Being able to see what type of gameplay you can expect is I think a good thing. So I want to have one of those for all the classes if we can. Yeah.
Great. And you have a lot of classes now, the deep dive, so that's a lot of content.
We do.
Great. All right, so moving on to Path of Exile 1 and Affliction first. So Affliction looks like you're kind of walking through a carpet of cockroaches with a candle to scare them off. Do you guys ever worry when you design a league mechanic like this that you're going to be just scaring some players off? They're just going to nope out because of that?
Why? Why would they know about it's bugs?
no.
Well, I mean, it's
It is a
buddies.
horror game, and there's a lot of horror in there already.
Yeah. You
We've had a
summon
few
demons.
examples though, like just to give a small anecdote of there was, I think it was the last or maybe the current the mystery box that has the spider portal in it.
Mhm.
We actually had people like specifically go, I don't want to buy this mystery box because I have arachnophobia and I don't want to get that spider. Is there a way I can get everything but the spider from it? And the short answer is no. But like, I mean, how does that person kill Weaver or get through?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. But no, generally, like the game has a lot of
Yeah,
horrific stuff.
there's
in
actually
it,
a lot
and
of
as you
spiders
can
in the
see
fucking
from
game.
what's going on in that mercenary demo. You know, we're not not pulling our punches when it comes to that stuff for sure.
That's good.
I remember Eric came across a list of things not to include in games because they scare the players. Things like objects that are too sharp and pointy, or trypophobia triggering clusters of small irregular holes. And he's like, "This is very useful."
Design Bible.
Add
there.
these.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, this is great. All right, if we put these
So,
in.
talking about mechanics, the wisps that allow you to explore the wildwood are somewhat of a limited resource, it seems. Is this a timer or is it a distance traveled, some kind of
Distance
mechanics like
traveled.
It's distance traveled, but it's distance
Okay.
traveled into the bugs and the cockroaches and stuff.
Yep.
So it's how much of that you can purge away. So if you run back on a path you've already been, like let's say you run up some way and then you want to go back and then go a different direction, like running back where you've been doesn't use the resource, but running anywhere new
Ooh.
does.
Okay.
I think that'll be a popular decision instead of it being like, say, a hard timer.
Yeah, for sure.
So how long is a venture into the wildwood typically? Like, how long are you like exiting your map?
Well, even typical is somehow subjective here, but obviously it depends on your character.
Build.
But I mean,
Yeah.
anywhere.
He said
I would expect most people to be in there like kind of a minute, upwards of 2 minutes. But
So
like,
it sort of depends on what you run into, though, because if you run into a boss fight, it can it can be a while.
it does depend
So-
what you find. But like, I mean, you could be in there as short as 30 seconds, or or a lot less if you're just not really caring where you're going. But that is not the right tactic to have at all.
And there
Ooh.
isn't time pressure here in any way. You can be in there for a quarter of an hour if you're just incredibly methodical and barely move.
I don't think that anyone would be doing that, but yeah.
You can.
We are catering to slower players who don't like the gotta go fast thing. Like,
Yeah.
you can go fast. It's more efficient to go fast, but you don't have to.
Yeah,
I
that's good.
wanted, sorry, I wanted something that was normalized a bit more between faster and slower players. Like you can
Right.
do it at your own pace, as opposed to feeling like ultra stressed.
Yeah.
And a faster player can do it as fast as they want, and that's still fine.
Yeah, poggers, dude.
Excellent. So you get these wisps and you free them. They go into your map and they infect monsters and make them drop more loot. Are they like more likely to choose more powerful enemies like rares and bosses, or is it just fully random?
They are more likely to pick, bosses and rares or higher rarity monsters going down. Yes.
And otherwise there would have been like no chance for multiple wisp types to go into one monster, right? So
Yeah.
we had to make it so that it was relatively likely for that to occur, but it doesn't always happen. It's kind of it's variable.
As a typical Path of Exile player, I immediately thought of abuse cases for this. Can you like kill all the monsters in a map except the boss, and then just go in and come out, and then free
Yes.
the wisp into the boss only?
That's
Stacking it up.
exact. That was my.
Thankfully, as
That was
we're
my
also PvE
strat.
players, we have also thought of this.
No.
We don't think of everything, but at least in that case, no, it is a chance per monster. So if you clear the whole map and then go and do it, the resultant is, well, it's actually detrimental for you.
Yeah. And the
Oh.
wildwood always appears at the start of the map. So
Oh.
that means that you always like have the chance, like that way you get the most, just to make sure that you get the most what do you call it, equity of the drop equity or whatever out of doing it. So like
A little like Delirium, where the mirror would spawn.
exactly, it is exactly like that.
Yep.
Oh,
Great. Oh, you guys have thought of it.
We've
Poggers.
done this for a while now. I guess.
Some experience.
So I can't just kill
So
everything.
some
but the
players love
boss.
mechanics in maps, and others seem to love ones that cause them to take a break from map. There's definitely some divide there. Interestingly, I noticed that Affliction is a little bit of both. It's a portal, but it juices your map afterwards. How do you folks like to balance the desires of the player base when it comes to designing leagues like this?
Ultimately, we just like to do a bit of all of it. Sometimes it's out of map, sometimes it's in map, sometimes in this case it's a bit of both. Like there isn't really some, elaborate decision that goes into it. It's just kind of like we feel like it's time for one or the other.
I mean, we definitely have discussions of like, oh, we've done a couple of an area ones, let's do an out of area one. Oh, we've done some out of area ones, let's do an area one. Like, in this case, we were like, it just sort of felt good to have both things. So it was good. But, yeah, like honestly, we try to just have a variety.
It's this kind of concept, at least that I use internally, which is what shape is the combat, and we want to try all the different shapes we can do, and we haven't run out of shapes yet.
This
Oh,
shape
that's-
technically is whatever shape you want to, because you can run. So it's undefined shape.
All right.
I have to always look out for my co-op buddies. How does Affliction work in multiplayer?
Ooh.
So once you die, you can't go back in. Just worth noting. Technically, that's multiplayer or single player, but only the map owner can, or if they're not present, I believe it nominates someone else, but I'll make sure that's the case if not.
Ooh,
Can
he's about
actually
to check it.
reveal fog or the mist, whatever the bugs.
Oh.
And when you collect, so the expectation is the party members kind of follow them around, and the
So party leader in
wisps
charge.
that you collect, it's the same amount. So they're just a shared pool. Like it
Like
doesn't.
any player who collects wisps will go to the primary player.
To the map
so like
holder.
they're all so there's effectively the map owner is the one in charge of the
Yeah.
of exploring basically. Yeah.
But anyone can pick them up if you want to spread out a little bit like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it works in multiplayer. Due to the nature of the rewards, just being based on the monsters' drops, they will scale with like party drops like normal. So there's no like it. They just work as standard multiplayer drops would work.
Great. And we get
Ooh.
this new ascendancy system as a reward for this, which seems quite significant, especially seeing
Oh,
some of the
Yes.
specific bonuses there. How challenging is it to actually unlock these Wildwood ascendancies and gain all of their points?
So you can get 8 points per class. You get your first 2 points when you meet the NPCs, which
Okay.
occurs relatively early. I think we have and it is slightly RNG based, and is whether or not you find them. And but you can increase the chance of finding them by following the trails of wisps. They will lead to them.
So the different colors have different things at the end of the trails, so you can kind of pick which direction you want to go.
And each color associates to an NPC. So I think they can start appearing around Act 2, and then the expectation is
Act
by
2?
end of Act 5, you've probably found each of them once. And when you meet them, you get your first 2 points, and then they'll give you a quest if you spec into that class to find more wisps or kill some monsters, like real basic quests. All done within the forest, and then you get your 4th point, and then or 3rd and 4th points, and then you have a quest to kill like a mini boss, and then it'll give you your 5th and 6th, and then the final 2 points are from killing the final boss of the league, which is probably relatively difficult. Like that's a
That's
80
the
level
harder
83
part.
kind of
That's the end game
maybe
part.
equivalent to say like Lycia from Sanctum or not quite pinnacle boss, but like just below it kind of thing. So that will be hard. So you could argue the first 6 points, the first 2 points are very easy. First 6 easier than probably say Labyrinth or the normal Ascendancy equivalent, but the last 2 points will be quite a lot harder than the regular Ascendancy 8 last 2 points.
And this is in parallel / addition to your existing Ascendancy class and its progress. You have 2 classes here to clarify.
Damn.
Yeah, and that
Double
last one that was revealed was like a little bit of everything. pretty cool. Those charms. So the unique specters from the Breaker of Oaths, including bosses like the Hydra, was certainly a surprise. Can you have more than one Hydra specter or like an army of bosses?
You can have up to your specter limit of Hydras, but they cannot be desecrated. So once you have it, once you have the item, you buy it from him. You can only specter it once. Once it dies, then you have to buy more of them. But yes, it will be hard to find them.
You can trade them.
Yes, you can trade for them. I really wanted this whole I wanted you to be able to find the NPC and then be able to effectively buy something from them that could be worth multiple divines. And I'm like, a Hydra could be worth multiple divines. Like, let's see if we can do that.
Note, you can buy these and trade them even if you aren't that class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
So effectively, so there's a reason to look at the shop for all of the
All the
NPCs,
dudes.
regardless of whether or not you're that Ascendancy class, because other people can use them.
Talk about the fragility of the Hydra.
Yes. Well, it is worth noting the Hydra's health in particular is relatively low, so you do have to keep it alive. The specters in general they're pretty interesting. There's a lot I've tried to go for where we've gone and tried to give stats that other builds wouldn't use. Like there's one, for example, where one of its properties just says your owner, as in the player, has 5% more attack damage. Or melee attack damage. I can't remember which of those two. And then if you get all your specters, you can get like 40% more attack damage. But now you're a melee build that's investing in plus specter limit, and there's some interesting weird things you might be doing there. And then of course that means you need minion life, otherwise they're all just going to die. And there's hopefully some kind of weird, interesting builds that come out of this, where you have unorthodox builds using specters that you normally wouldn't.
And you had that interesting one with Fire Fury and
Oh yeah, there's a kind of, I don't know what they're called, but it's effectively Fire Fury and Hailrake, and they specifically the Fire Fury one says becomes empowered if there is if you also have a Hailrake Spectre, and the Hailrake Spectre says the same thing. So then you want to run two different ones, which again is also kind of abnormal, because normally when you do play a Spectre build, you stack a lot of the same thing. So it's promoting a bit of just different gameplay around that.
So there's something going on between the Fire Fury and the Hailrake. Then they have some backstory together. I
There's always
guess.
something going
They're
on.
empowering each other, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Fanfic authors take note.
Yeah, here we go. New fanfic in progress.
Oh my
The
god.
charms for the Wildwood Primalists, they capture random parts of other ascendancy nodes and allow you to create a new one in kind of like a build your own ascendancy fashion. What sort of limitations are there? Can you just get like any power from any node?
You can't get anything. I can't remember exactly what you can and can't get, but there are some stuff that is like it's binary and ultra powerful, and like that's just too much power to give from a single node like that can have two modifiers on it.
Yeah.
So you can't get everything, but you can get most things, and even in some cases where they are binary, we've made non-binary versions of that property where it's like can either be chance based or percentage
Yeah,
based.
10% chance to happen of it.
But they do stack as well. So like for example, you can get the 3 sockets, and obviously you can get like we showed say the occultist curse explosion. Like if you just want to go all in on the chance of that, you could try and get that on all 3 of them. But again, it's going to be pretty rare. They're unmodifiable, but again tradable. And I'm expecting, again, going under the philosophy of I want you to be able to find these NPCs and occasionally find something worth a lot. I do want it to be that occasionally you find one and you get
Hit the
multiple
jackpot.
divines worth of a trade because you find just the perfect charm.
And again, you don't have to be that class to find the charm.
Yes, we'll keep reiterating that. Yes.
Yeah,
Always
there's
check
some
the shops.
Yeah.
Always.
The shops
some wealth to be had.
should be valuable. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds like it. Are there any
wait.
limitations to this primalist shouting items at corpses thing? It's like, are people just going to be going around shouting at every corpse for extra loot?
Well, it's one of these interesting. This one's been very controversial. I'll point out.
Yeah, that
internally.
seems like a meme one.
See, for me, I really like it because it's a thing where if you're an efficient, well, okay, let's think of it a few different ways. Firstly, if you're destroying corpses, it doesn't work, right? There's no body left to get loot from. So you can deal with spikers and or the porcupines and among other things. But so
Small F. Ooh, big F.
we had a bit of a
Yeah, we're back now.
Discord dip there. I'm going to just start that part again. But one thing to note is that, yes, you have to have the corpse around, which means you have to be playing a build that doesn't destroy corpses.
Yep.
Meaning, of course, you have to deal with the porcupine Goliaths. I don't know who heard that before, but whatever. And then the other thing to note is it actually rewards slower players more than faster players because you have to Warcry, which is cooldown based. Are you really going to wait around meticulously Warcrying on every single corpse, or are you just going to move on and kill more monsters and run more maps? And so if you want to get the most out of your map, of course, that's a way to do it. But if you want to get most out of your time, that is not the way to do it. So yes, you could like Warcry, bind it to your left click and then just Warcry whenever it's available and get whatever loot you can get.
I reckon opening the chests is the
opening
that's time efficient.
Opening chests is a big time.
That's the main use of that skill, I would say.
But it is worth noting, just to get into some specifics of how that works as well. It doesn't care about the monster's quantity and rarity. It does care about map quant and rarity. So a boss is just going to occasionally drop like an item, if that. It doesn't like re-drop all its drops.
Yeah,
so
because it's
not
the lead or whatever.
like ultra powerful. Due to that, it's probably honestly going to yield a little bit more. Like it's more for like getting a little bit of extra currency than it
It's like
is
a
getting
meme.
like unique items and rare items and stuff
Yeah,
like
it
that.
definitely feels like a meme kind of thing, but it's good.
I'll
that they
ask
put
the
it
obvious
in.
question that you knew you'd get when you added a backpack inventory expansion. Do you think you'll give this to people outside of the Primalist?
Short answer, no. But I mean, look, we chuck these in, we experiment for 3 months, and we see. This was also the node of the second highest level of controversy internally.
A backpack.
We'll give it a go. We'll see what happens. But like, I do not see that thing returning outside of the Primalists after the league, even if the league happens to go core.
Yeah.
Controversial league design, it sounds like, internally.
Well, they're 3 months
Attention.
experiments
Yeah,
essentially.
we like to try things.
I say controversy. It's fun.
It's not like there's a shouting match or anything going on, right? Like it's just.
Well, one of us isn't shouting. No.
We've got some more
that's a-
chat questions on Affliction before we move on to some of the other features. When you enter the Wildwood, do you start at the last place you're at? Is it like a continual exploration, or is it a new area each time?
New area.
It's not continuous, no.
Yeah.
It is effectively an infinite forest, but you're put in a random place every single time. It's new exploration. It isn't continuous from the previous areas, no.
So it feels slightly like the idea of Delve without the actual specific.
It isn't
Delve
real.
world.
It isn't really like Delve because it doesn't have the whole like big map or anything like that.
Mhm.
Are the wisps tradable or collected as currency items at all?
No, I mean they're tradable to the vendors, but that's not really
Yeah.
trading. They're usable as currency for the vendors, but aside from that, no.
No.
They are, and between instants, they don't carry over at all.
Right.
Because once you leave the Wildwood, they're dispersed, so you don't get to keep
Oh
them.
no, Papiga Mamiga.
And just clarifying for people that missed this detail, you'll be able to use the regular Ascendancy class alongside the Wildwood Ascendancy
Correct.
class. It's extra
Yes,
on top.
You will eventually get 8 points in both. Yes.
Sweet. Can monsters attack from the fog of war in Affliction, or only once they're fully revealed? Ooh, good question.
You will not get no.
Will you get sniped by?
You're both not going
Shadow
to be
wizards?
given an advantage as a ranged character to shoot into it, and you will not be attacked from it. They will not do similar to Delve Darkness. They will come out of the darkness before they engage with you. And generally, only things you reveal will actually engage with you.
Do map modifiers from the area you entered the Wildwood from affect the Wildwood, or is it a completely separate zone in that
No,
regard?
No, it's
The
still not.
map mods do affect it, yes. And
Oh, wow.
What?
where it doesn't increase the amount of wisps you get, it does increase the loot you get in general, which multiplicatively applies with the bonuses the wisps give monsters afterwards. So you are obviously to get the max rewards like normal, you're incentivized
But
to
pack size works on the monsters in the Wildwood.
Oh yes.
And because pack size works on them, that means you do get more wisps if you increase pack size, because they're part of the drops of those monsters as well.
There are monsters that have wisps already in them in the forest, and they will give wisps. So yes, pack size will increase the amount of wisps you can get.
Which actually means that pack size can increase the duration that you can stay in the Wildwood, if I understand that correctly.
Different wisps.
Oh, different. All right, because that's
Yes.
right. Okay, so it doesn't. It's just increase the rewards then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just more rewards.
Yes, more
Yeah,
loot.
between this and the
Technically
wisps you're
difficulty.
freeing, it sounds like a bit of a map juicing league then.
Yeah.
That
You're
was,
excited about?
I mean, that was what I was going for. I really like things like Delirium where they
Juicers.
overlap with all the other leagues.
Yep.
It's worth noting on that point. You might think, okay, the wisps disperse into the air and affect monsters once you exit. It will also affect monsters that are then spawned afterwards. So if you then go and activate a breach, there is like a portion of the breach monsters will be dusted as well, and thus their rewards and difficulty will also be increased. So yeah, it overlaps with any in area league, I believe, as long as the monster gives loot and experience. Which obviously if
Damn.
it doesn't, you don't really care about it. So
Yeah.
This league sounds cracked. I like it.
Yeah.
All right.
We're gonna try
Talking
to
about
farm
the
a mage
ultimatum,
blood.
the long-awaited return. It has been a long time in the returning. Did you face some specific challenges with its re-implementation or something?
Main challenge, I guess, was finding time to actually do the rebalance and reassess it. But like once we found the time, which we did, we got through all that, and I mean, now it's finally coming back.
Hey.
But yeah, it just comes down to time. We've got so much we always want to do, and just finding the resources to be able to get someone to fully reassess it and make the changes that we want it can be challenging for sure.
True.
So it's not just something you wanted to just slap back in as it was then. It sounds like it's
Oh,
changed a fair
It's
bit.
It's had a substantial amount of work done to it. Like, it is quite a lot there. There's a lot there.
Oh.
And obviously, it's going to be very different to how it was given the Atlas passives as well, and how you can modify it and change it, which will be relatively fun. But
Yeah.
taking that into consideration as well is something that we didn't have to deal with before that we do now.
Why do you think that ultimatum was so popular and so requested to return that it was like the number one thing asked about at ExileCon? Is there anything to like learn from that for future league designs?
Well, I think about it, and also why do I think I like it? I mean, the mod selection is fun. I like how it works in parties as well, and I like, for people who know my Aurabot addiction, I love playing in parties. where you get to vote on the mods and you go and pick the mod that no one wants just because you want to. Or you're an aura bot and you pick that mod that causes your auras to apply to the enemies, and you just then hopefully your teammate, yeah.
And the double or nothing
Chaos.
stuff is also very. I don't want to use the word addictive because that's a bad word.
Gamba.
Definitely addictive.
Oh, I love that, and I think a lot of people resonate with that as well. Where you when you've got the divine orbs on the line, or the headhunter on the line, or like just whatever items on the line, it's like the thrill is just.
Yep, you're
you
just
know,
like,
it gives you that adrenaline rush that like I almost used to get in Hardcore League. You know, when I actually played that a lot more. Rest in peace.
It's risk reward, to put it another way, right? It's good risk
Sure.
reward stuff. Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
I think it had like a unique pacing too, with like intense action, break, intense action, break. That,
Oh yeah, for sure. I like that as well a lot. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say too many lessons learned aside from just like, or like, you know, how we can use things in the future. But I guess, yeah, ultimately the risk reward and the pacing are probably the two biggest ones.
Do you want to talk about what happened with the combat changes to do with rare monsters and stuff in Ultimatum?
ooh.
Yeah, I think it was around the time there was a lot of there was a bit of like, how do we make this harder that went on, and it ended up just cranking the rare monsters up. Like there was just points where there were like 9 rare of those blood chieftains on your screen, and the problem with that, especially with like obviously now looking at rare modifiers, like the level of visual pollution that adds, and like you can't even tell what's happening. Like there was a lot of going on in that league where there's just a massive crossfire of projectiles and just like a whole bunch of rare monsters, and like so we've gone with almost a more what we call expedition style balance, which is just like tone that down but make each monster individually more difficult and more meaningful. So it should be that it is less like more comprehensible in the moment as to what
Less
you're actually
clustered
fighting
up.
and what you're actually doing, and still difficult, as opposed to
Okay.
just like spam everything, like crank up the rare monster number to infinity. But that's mostly I think of what's going on. It's just which is honestly been working pretty well with respect to our monster balance lately.
Ooh.
So Metamorph is getting removed as a part of this coming back of Ultimatum, with its unique rewards going to Ultimatum. Can you tell me a little bit about that decision, like to remove Metamorph?
Yes, metamorph
There's a few
removal.
things going on there, but the first is just the visual clarity of it again. Going back to that, like
Mhm.
you put these monsters together, and then it just does this kind of like morphing thing. I mean, look, I've played this a lot, and it transforms into something, and then I'm dead. I'm like, I don't even know what just happened. Like,
Yes.
what killed me here? I actually don't know. And it is meant to be the case that obviously I know what monsters I'm putting in, and I'm putting in this monster, this monster, this monster, and I know these do this skills, and because this one's in the brain slot, it does this big AoE. But the reality is, like, that's way too much to try and know and remember, and like there's hundreds of monsters with hundreds of skills going on there, and it's like you can't really tell. And so when you do put it together, it's like, oh, I like these rewards, and you put those in, and that's ultimately what you do as a player for that. And so you put in a monster, it spawns, and you maybe just insta die or you maybe not. And getting that right is just pretty impossible, I would say. Like, I love the mechanic in a nutshell of you get to put monsters together to create a new boss fight, but it just wasn't working.
It was never my favorite league visually either. I just don't think it really looks that great.
Small F, huge F, big F.
Oh no, we dropped. I'm sure we'll get things back in just a second here, folks.
Hey.
Until then, enjoy the sliver of the side of my head while we get things repaired. We'll be back in just a moment.
In the other sense, it was just too easy. Like, the thing spawned and then just died within 3 seconds. Often the life wasn't
more
high enough,
technical
and no map
difficulties.
mod damage. Like, yeah,
That's pretty good.
it was just due for its removal, honestly.
Yeah, I certainly agree with a lot of issues that Metamorph had and experienced a lot of myself, but I do think there was a good idea there. And like you said, with the boss parts going together, that actually felt like it worked a little bit more. But like you said, it wasn't quite there. So something to play with in the future, maybe.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Dude.
The idea is, there is a sound idea there for sure that I'd like to see if we can play around with later and re-envision in some way, hopefully.
Yeah, you get the situation where in order to keep it, you kind of want to do all the work to rework it, and if you're doing all that work, you may as well just bring Ultimatum back.
So this does raise a question you haven't had to deal with before, where you've removed a mechanic now that has a premium tab that people have purchased. What is the plan for that?
So that tab,
Oh,
so due
yeah.
to Catalyst moving to Ultimatum and
Yeah,
there being
what
the
the
inscribed ultimatums, that tab is just immediately converted to an ultimatum tab. So it'll have the Catalyst will now store there, and your inscribed ultimatums will also. I think there's 60 slots for inscribed ultimatums in there as well. So you don't need to buy a new one; it'll automatically transfer over.
Perfect.
Poggers,
Sounds
dude.
great. All right. Let me just see if there's any other ultimatum questions. With Minimal out of the game, will there be another master hideout NPC to replace Tane?
Not currently, no.
All right.
He's like,
Can ultimatum
really,
be
bro?
blocked on the Atlas passive tree so that it doesn't appear?
Yes, it can. The same node that blocked Metamorph has been changed to a new node that blocks Ultimatum.
All right. Cool. We have a bunch of questions about transfigured gems. This is a big one, and chat also has a bunch of questions about it too. I can tell. So this new transfigured gem system's kind of a big deal.
Yes.
Is this replacing labyrinth enchantments, alternate qualities, and threshold jewels entirely?
Short answer, yes. It is replacing it. Belt enchants are gone, boot enchants are gone, etc. Which I like in the sense that it reopens, because those were very old designs. I mean, sure, the belt enchants came newer, but it does free up a lot of design space to use in the future. And with a lot of the changes to quality and what the gems are doing themselves, like the loss is ultimately inconsequential.
No more lab runs, boys.
So yeah, they're gone.
They're gone.
Deal with it. All
Lab
right.
runners,
are there
log
multiple
out.
different transfigurations for each skill, or is there one for each? It seems like so many new gems, effectively.
So, I mean, we're still cranking them out. Like, we're not going to stop until there's a cutoff, effectively, and then we'll probably add them later if we still feel like we have to. But we're aiming for 1 per primary damaging skill minimum, but 2 maximum. So it's 1 to 2 per skill, but auras don't get them, heralds don't get them, utility stuff don't. We're really focusing on your
1
main
to
skills
2
that you
per
are
skill.
primarily normally 6 link and whatnot. I mean, I know you can do higher link herald builds, but you know.
That limit of 2 maximum is just in the context of this particular expansion. If it's a popular system, we can make many and many in the future.
Yeah.
It allows us to, like, so there's this thing where,
This
like,
is
cleave is
wild.
cleave, and
Yes.
you could change cleave to something. You could change cleave, but now you're ruining just the kind of like simple thing it is at level 2. You get it at the game, you just want to cleave stuff. So overcomplicating that to try and make it more interesting and new is honestly not the right answer, and it's kind of a thing that's happened to a lot of skills. So now with this alternate gem system, we get to take those ideas that people have of like how we can be transformative with something like cleave, and we get to just add that skill gem without having to compromise that early game experience. And that, I think, is
That's
very
crazy.
valuable. And it's, I mean, the possibilities are endless, as I guess I could say, right? Like,
So how do you be transformative with something like cleave? I'm curious. How do you approach that?
well, I don't know. Like, I can either talk about what we've actually done or talk about what we could do.
Both.
I mean, something
You
you can
said
get. Well,
both.
actually, okay, let's go with what we have done. I think what we've done with it, and there's some details here I might be wrong on, or something that might have changed, but we'll just get into it. I think right now you have to be using
Jonathan's like, fuck.
a sword and an axe, so 2 different weapons, which is interesting. I believe it also scales. I think it generates rage and scales AOE based on rage. So it's kind of like pushing you to be a rage build. So it's worth noting, like, that might sound more niche, and that is the point. That the alternate gems, the transfigured gems, are generally more niche. But the power opportunity is much higher as a resultant of that.
Yeah, if you go full
they will
rage.
scale way better into endgame, and it will save us the problem of just having this extreme like power curve of damage on cleave just to try and make it do an absurd amount of AoE again. So
Are there any other cleave?
I think we've just got the one right now. We experimented with a few others. I think there's one with Impale, but I think we've gone with that on Double Strike now, and like some stuff with Bleeding, but that's gone on something I did. So many. There's the hundreds of these things, and we've gone through so many hundreds of iterations that forgive my memory a little bit. But
They're literally cranking
there's a
these
lot
gems
going on
out.
there for sure.
How does this affect Val gems? Do these new versions have Val versions or only the originals?
These new version, well, technically the way it is worked now is just you can have a Val alternate cleave, and that just grants Val cleave, but it doesn't have the same mechanics, so it won't
Right.
have the rage thing. It like technically the Val skill is a separate ability, and so yes, it can be corrupted to grant that extra
Yeah,
ability.
you can
but
get the Val
it
skill, but it
have
doesn't
the same properties.
give you the super
Gotcha,
pog
yeah.
new stuff.
So are they always going to be just strictly better? Because that cleave version sounds better than regular cleave, or is it sometimes going to be they're just quite different?
It's strictly better if you embrace the niche. Yes.
Right.
So if you are investing in rage and
With two
sticking
different
into-
weapons.
and using the sword and axe, then yes, of course, it's better.
I mean,
But
you
if you're
can't exactly
using-
say that the one that has zombies falling from the sky is strictly better, right? It's just a totally
That's
different.
true.
It's
Dude,
a totally
I
different
mean,
thing.
I'm gonna do a zombie build. That's
It's
just
pretty
so
awesome.
fun.
It does depend on your definition of better, of course. But I'm talking about just like raw clear speed or raw, boss killing speed. Yes, from that measure, like especially with respect to the low level skills, that is often going to be the case if you embrace that build and that kind of more niche build. But yes, again, there are plenty that are like hard to compare. Like the Frostbomb is a good example. Like
Small F.
different. It's now a clearing skill as
Yeah,
opposed
it's now
to
a main skill.
more utility focused skill. Not
Yep.
having the cooldown, for example. So they a lot of them fill different roles, and so they can't really be compared one to one.
True.
I mean, it's definitely going to shift the meta a lot. Like, just because there's going to be, there's a lot of new stuff to try there. So
It's shifting it enough that if people were to ask me what I'm going to play, I actually genuinely have no idea. I honestly am. I don't know. I'll find out in the last day probably. But
I
Is
want
it
to
something
play a
you'll
falling
explore
corpse
with
build.
utility skills or support gems, things like that as well in the future?
it's a big maybe.
Yep.
Support gems. Haven't really thought about a support gem case. I mean,
thing with
Mm.
support gems is you can just add more support gems and you don't need to
Yeah.
worry about modifying the
You-
existing ones really. So
you
it's
may
not
as
quite
well
the
just
same.
add
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alternate heralds. It can be done in some cases. Yes, it can be. But
You can
we'll
just
see
add
whether
more
or not
heralds,
it
I think.
finds need for it. It's just in those cases, it's like it goes from giving buff A to buff B. Like doing it with an aura, like you'd have to do something very wildly different to make it really transformative. Otherwise, you're going from just giving a certain stat to giving another stat, and that's not really what it's about.
That's
What does
cool.
this mean for heist in terms of it losing one of its big rewards, but also like,
Yeah.
specific heists that were
The
gem type heists and
gems.
whatnot?
So the way, how that works now is that every single tile set just so the rewards are no longer bound to the, I should say the rewards from the display cases at the end.
Yeah.
At the end of the blueprints are no longer bound to the tile set of the base item type of the
The
blueprint.
map.
So
if you're heisting
Yeah.
for
So you can get kind of any of the rewards. You can get replicas from any of them. You can get alternate base types from any of them, or experimented base types, and you can get now currency. One thing we did do is buff the currency. Like we did certainly obviously acknowledge losing the gems removes some of the value from running heist.
all the value.
Quite a lot of it.
Yeah.
So we buffed the currency just to make it better. So when you do get to the end, you have less like miss cases where you just get like 2 chance orbs. It's like that from completing a blueprint, that's just like completely insufficient. We have added new trying to make chase ones, but as it's pretty hard to reliably make chase uniques because the meta and the players kind of ultimately control what that is. But we've tried
what
to
they
add more
chase.
powerful ones. We have rebalanced a number of replica uniques, and we've rebalanced a lot of experimented base types, including trying to emphasize that the jewelry, the amulets, and the rings have some very, very powerful alternatives. Honestly, they're probably the best amulet you can get now is an experimented base type amulet. But obviously, they're pretty hard to find. And you'd have to craft it, of course.
It's 5 new replica uniques, I believe,
Yes, I believe there's 5 new replica uniques. Yeah.
and 10 other uniques in this expansion, so 15 new
Yep.
uniques total.
Yep.
I don't think we mentioned that in the.
Yeah.
Nice. So safe to say heist will be something you'll be keeping a close eye on then to make sure that the rewards are up to par now after this removal.
I hope so for sure. I mean, me personally, I'm just excited about those experimented base type amulets and rings. Like before, we had the -1 prefix, +1 suffix, and now you've got like -3 prefix, +3 suffix, and -3 suffix, +3. The invert of that, and like it's like, what kind of ring can you make when you've got 6 prefixes? Is that better? Is that worse? Or like 6 suffixes, and then there's like ones that reduce the amount of There's ones that reduce the amount of prefixes, but
He's
increase
like,
the
he's like,
potency
he's
of
leaking.
suffixes
He's
and
like,
stuff
he's
like that.
leaking
And
the
so,
shit.
Stop hearing about this part.
yeah.
I'm like, geez.
I hate that facial expression as well whenever.
It's like, you sure about this?
Jonathan and I have seen the code to handle this stuff, and we're both like, "Ooh, how does?"
No, it's just yeah.
Okay, it's good.
Nice.
Cool.
They're having a
I like
good
when-
old time. I
like
love
when
this.
Seeing devs learn about these things for the first time.
They're like, yo, is this real
There's
for real?
always so much going on that it is nearly impossible for everyone to know everything.
For
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. Yeah.
They're like,
That makes sense. So people are obviously pretty excited about the transfigured gems. Like they do look quite exciting, and that's a lot of effectively new skills for us to play with. But
oh man.
it does kind of raise the question about one of the more controversial decisions with this change is that, well, the labyrinth it has
It's
fairly
gone.
different gameplay than most of Path of Exile. It's got like a lot of environmental hazards and traps and puzzles and a labyrinthian layout.
Oh, the
And
labs, yeah.
naturally, that's not exactly super wildly popular content for people to run. Not everyone wants to play that. So can you tell me about the decision to make Transfigured Gems specifically a reward for Labyrinth, especially since it looks like something that you'll want to run a lot to get more of them?
Well, a few things to talk about here. I mean, the labyrinth is, I understand. I understand how some people feel about it and people don't. But one thing is, it is core content that you do run through the campaign and you do to ascend. And we wanted it to be that the transfigured gem system is accessible there, as opposed to, like, say, where alternate qualities were in Heist, even though there was a kind of soft mandatory nature of having alternate qualities. It's like, well, it was the same problem. I don't want to run Heist, let's say, in a given league, or someone does and someone doesn't, and so you have to trade for them. And so for that case, it's the exact same thing, right? You can trade for these transfigured gems, of course. But we've done two things as well. So obviously, when you get to the end of it, you put your gem in, you can pick from the one of three outcomes. It maintains its level and its quality as to what you put in. So the skill doesn't just become worse, at least in that regard. But sometimes there is an option that will transform it directly into its transfigured counterpart, which means if you don't want to, take the gamble and just keep trying to pick random ones, you can wait for that and convert your, say, Firestorm directly into a transfigured Firestorm. So that at least will make that a bit easier.
Oh, wow. That's going to be very specific.
But yeah, ultimately, I wanted it to be somewhere where it was introduced early enough, around level 30 is about right. So you're not waiting until end game before you can get these. Like, a player can experience these through the campaign, get a feel for them, get used to them, and level them up, instead of getting to end game and then completely changing their entire build. Like, it being early enough, and Labyrinth is around the point where that is like, a good place to commit to that. And also, you're already doing it for your Ascendancy, so it's a good way to introduce the mechanic to those players, as opposed to just kind of putting it somewhere a little bit random and a little bit hidden. So that's the primary motivation.
Path of Exile has a lot of content that is going to vary depending on player taste. Some people like Delve, some people don't, and that content has specific rewards, and those rewards are almost always tradable.
Yeah,
so in this case, if you want one of the gems, you can also trade for it if you don't like Labyrinth.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm interested in that idea of like players running into it as a course of their regular gameplay. Does that mean there's a pretty good likelihood then that each time you run like Normal Crawl and Merciless Labyrinth and whatnot for the first time, and say you only do them those times, that you're going to actually get a pretty relevant gem reward upgrade each run?
The option is always there. So one of the crafts on the bench is always to convert it to a transfigured gem. So it's not like that one's random.
Yep.
Whether or not you'll get the one you exactly want, obviously, isn't reliable, but you will always get. So if you put in the common one that's put there is if you put in an int gem, you will get a transfigured int gem back. So at least it's likely if you put in a spell, you'll get a spell.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to take it, you can just be like, no, I don't want it, and take your gem back and then try again next time. So it doesn't like force you to. So you can put your primary skill in there, hoping for the best. And if you don't get it, you take it back and then just keep playing your build, or you run it again if you want, or you can wait till crawl and run it.
Or you can have a stack of garbage gems to throw in there. And
I know this is a bit later in the game, but the Uber Labyrinth has 2 crafts by default instead of 1 now. So when you get to the end, you get a few more opportunities at doing it, and that's one tactic could be knowing that the normal the easiest labyrinth is the shortest and easiest to get through, obviously being lower level and shorter. You can, at like a high level player, could just go and run that a number of times just to try and get the right transfigured gem. But obviously you won't get a lot of the good crafts and a lot of the good rewards that also come from it. But if that was your way to try and get your most appropriate transfigured gem the fastest, like that is a tactic you could do. So it's not really meant to be ultra taxing and time consuming to try and get the one you want. But again, as said, if you
Small left, but I think are they addressing
That sounds like from a reward
lab
perspective, that's quite
farmers?
good for both lab runners and also people just doing it just the once as they go through. So I
Is
like the
it?
reward sounds of that. But are there any planned changes to running the labyrinth itself or making the labyrinth better in the future?
we went over that a lot. And as a simple, again, going back to like, we think of it like this: we could have done that, or we could have added ultimatum. It's a resourcing problem. Not to say those are the two options, but what I'm saying is that it is very what it needs is a lot of love, and we need the time to do it. So yes, we had a massive list of changes of things we wanted to do, and we just couldn't find the time to do it. So it is something I
But it's
definitely
on the
would love
list.
to do later. For
It's
sure.
on the list.
All right. Next league, guys. Good. Nice.
Next
Cool.
league.
Sounds good.
I was about to joke confirmed, but that's a bit dangerous.
That's
yeah,
up
Is
for you.
next week, so-
because they're gonna be like, "Yo, so
we get to
Chris
see all the
Wilson
gems before
confirmed
launch,
it
the
next
transfer
week."
gems.
It is our intention to start posting them, yes. As we're still churning through them, I think our plan is to start posting, like we'll do a series of posts. I could be wrong. The community team can correct me at some point, but I think it's to do a series of posts, and as we then make more, we'll just do more posts and just keep adding them until the last very possible moment.
It's
Right.
worth mentioning with this kind of content because it's so parallel and because so many, like, every gem is optional because there are so many possibilities. We
Yes.
just start 200 and then the ones that are finished get released and the other ones get released later or scrapped, and we don't know what the set is going to be currently, and we're just going to keep going till the last minute getting these in.
Dude, that's so crazy. They don't even know.
All right. For standard players,
That
what's
is such
happening
a
to existing
difference.
alt quality gems and lab enchant items? and
Dude,
stuff like that?
Diablo's planning for season
You're
4. They're
right.
like, we have no
I think the
idea
enchants remain.
what's gonna
Um,
freaking finally go in here.
Alt quality gems, I do believe all of this will be in the patch notes after this, so I might say some wrong stuff, but I do believe alt quality gems just get converted to regular quality, retaining the value.
But the quality, the quality that is now different because we've changed.
Oh yeah, well that's it's worth noting that the quality on or almost every single gem, I think the word quality appears 314 times in the patch notes. I believe is what it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
There has been a substantial quality adjustment to all the skills. I know this is tangential from the question a little bit, but we're going with a more multiplicative approach there. So instead of like just a lot of gems being 20% increased damage or 10% increased attack speed, we're trying to really look at what is the skill doing. Like if it's something that is about duration, we instead add duration, but instead of doing 20% increased duration, we're adding like +1 or 2 seconds, like, or +0.1 per quality kind of thing. So it's meant to be more multiplicative as opposed to increases, because there were skills where obviously the more of the increase you have on the passive tree, the worse the quality becomes, or vice versa.
Yep.
So yeah, but this is, I think, changed with a lot of the base skills as well, mind you. I think discharge in particular is one where it's like it has increased area of effect per charge consumed, where that obviously could get it to a massive amount of increased area of effect, which means if you're playing that build, then investing into like a 10% increased area of effect node on the tree is ultimately doing
so
nothing.
we can't
Like, you're
use
going from
discharge
200%
next
increase
build.
to
We got to finish
210,
it up
like,
this week.
kind of doesn't really matter. But now, so that's been changed to be multiplicative as well. So as we've gone through and done this qualities, we've tried to do that on a lot more gems to make the gem more like about its base stats, and the passive tree is multiplying that as opposed to adding with those stats.
I see.
Which does yield a fairly large amount more power for a lot of these skills.
Does it?
That sounds like a quality change. I love it. Sorry, couldn't help. We've run over time, but just a couple more questions before we finish up today. So in the past, it was pretty typical for expansions to come packaged with some pretty substantial changes to skill balance. Obviously, we're getting like a ton of new skills. So that's obviously affecting like skill meta and whatnot. But the last few leagues haven't really had much in the way of skill balance.
Like
And
nerfing and
we're
whatnot.
finding like, player expectations there and Is that something that you're continuing to like not do, or any thoughts about that?
Again, a lot of it comes down to honestly time, but for this one, I really wanted to do something that wasn't just playing that almost cat and mouse game of like.
Are you ready for the new
upskill A and
league?
then
What
next
you gonna
week
play?
upskill
I
B
don't
to be
know.
comparable, and then
I've got like
maybe it goes
5
too
different
fast,
builds
and
in
then
my
you
head
upskill A
already.
again, and if you don't do that, it's just nerf.
But we need to
central,
read the
right? So
patch notes.
where we do that
Probably
for some
go through it
extreme cases
tomorrow.
where we bring them down. I wanted to do something that really
The
wasn't
patch notes are gonna affect
just, let's up cleave
how
by
I
10%
do one or
and
two
something else by
builds.
10%. And again, noting I don't want to add
But hi, Cloftus.
mechanical complexity to a lot of skills.
I was reading them
especially
earlier, just a
early,
lot to go through.
because it
Yeah,
just makes them more convoluted.
that's
and
why I said I'll do
confusing.
that tomorrow.
So this
I'm
was a
probably
system
doing
that allowed us to
explosive
not
arrow
play that game,
totems.
but yet
Ooh.
add thousands
I'm
and
definitely
thousands of
doing
millions
a
of possible
falling,
permutations,
a
and
raining zombie
we're
minion
going
build.
to be less hesitant, given time, resources, less
And
hesitant
then
to change the balance and change.
I want to
alternate
still
gems
do a
or add new
planetary
ones.
discharge
So it's
build.
given us a system that allows us to do future balance a lot.
And then I want to see
without
how my
compromising kind of that core game and that new player experience at all.
It does. It's also like, I mean, the quality changes are a pretty substantial balance change.
how my cast on crit
Oh no,
the
that is a big
for sure.
the whatchamacallit, the
and
ice
a
spear
number of
build
skills have
goes
changed. Like
for the word loop.
what we've done is simplified some base skills, because we have, and then what we've done is taken what they were doing. So
And then I don't even know. There's more
trying
stuff.
to do. I don't actually know if we've done this because so maybe not. I know I probably shouldn't mention things like this, but for example,
fine.
you get ethereal knives, and it's got all this talk about lingering blades going on. And
Jonathan,
most people
look
who
at
play the game
Jonathan's
in
face. He's
advance
like,
know what
"Fuck,
lingering
bro."
blades are, but like a new player's not going to know that at all. So we've returned. So ideally, we return EK to its former glory of what it was, and then we add an alternate gem that's really emphasizing that lingering blades mechanic and benefiting from that. And then we add another alternate, whatever, how many more alternate gems we want to. So it's allowing us to restore some of those, especially lower level gems, to their simplest forms.
What?
As what they should be, and then also give them a
Yeah.
rebalance. I think often it's resulting in them being a little bit stronger early, which is going to change a little bit. But I like the resultant a lot better, where you're not getting overwhelmed with this kind of almost unnecessary information early, and then you get this alternate gem that's really emphasizing that mechanic more. And if you then go down that path, it can become even
Ooh.
stronger than it ever was.
If a player is approaching the feedback of there need to be balance changes based on the fact that they feel there's some staleness in the metagame, if they feel they're playing the same kind of pool of builds for a number of leagues in a row, then the transfigured gem stuff will have fixed that, right? Like every build is now affected by there being multiple different versions of the skill available.
For sure.
There will be, it is going to look entirely different. And it's worth noting, transfigured gems came from me sitting down with Mark and saying the players have an expectation for significant balance changes. The problem is we can't really do any. We've hit the point of like having to make the skills more complicated. What can we do? And Mark suggested transfigured gems, which, as Jonathan Blow would say, there was immediately tons of gold on the ground to pick up with that design thing, right? It's not so much cool stuff we can do, and absolutely is
Holy
going to
hell.
affect every build in the game.
Ah, that's exciting.
Great. So conversely, talking about ascendancy changes, last league Chieftain underwent a pretty big overhaul,
Huge.
but its rework seemed to have few fans in the end. It's
Yeah,
around
not
2%
very
pick rate for
many-
most
not
of the
very
league
many
in
war
softball.
chiefs logged
Although
in.
it did gain some fans in hardcore, it seemed at least. What sort of goals do you have, like larger ascendancy changes like that, and do you feel like the Chieftain hit the mark?
2%'s not bad, to be honest. It's still 10 times higher, 20 times higher than what it was. Or maybe even infinitely higher, because I think it was 0.0% for a while. Obviously rounding.
Wow. So,
But honestly, I would say it didn't
That's a
quite hit the
success.
mark. But like, there's a fine line to tread when it comes to ascendancy balance. Like, 2% is probably less of a failure than 25%. Because if everyone's
Right.
playing it, it's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
we go back to like Slayer Cyclone era where there's 51% or something. I'm going off Pro Ninja numbers, obviously, so high level players. But that's within a kind of like era realm of acceptability. But yes, I would say like in an ideal world, it would have been a little bit better than what it was. So
yeah.
geez, it's hard.
2% conversion is good, though.
for sure.
Just
But yeah, and
War
obviously if
Chief is
something
gonna
does
have
get
their
used in
league.
hardcore and sees more use there. That is
Yeah,
something
they're
we
gonna
like to
have their
see,
league.
and that's cool. Whether or not it's intentional or accidental, generally it's just the players discovering what's best. Like we don't plan around that kind of thing. But
Is it something you're gonna continue working on then? Like not Chieftain specifically, but also just in general, trying to get something right with those pre-existing ascendancies.
It'll every so often it's going to come up where we rebalance a given set of them, or maybe we do a like wide sweeping numerical changes, or maybe we take 2 and completely redesign them, or take 1 and redesign it. But again, it's all at the expense of something else, and we just have to weigh those decisions. Like again, there's no time to do that when you have, you know, 100 to 200 between there of transfigured gems to make. You know, it's the same people doing those things. So we just have to make those choices as to what we want to do. And maybe there is a better metagame thing we could be doing, but eventually we're going to circle back to them and we're going to rebalance them or remake them. Yeah.
And you did add 3 new ascendancies in this expansion.
Yeah,
They did.
Yes, there are 3 new ascendancies.
3
yes.
new sentences. Yeah, true.
Awesome stuff. Thank you very much for spending so much time with us for the Q&A today. We did run a bit over time. I appreciate that, and it was a pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you, Chris.
This was
Jonathan, and
good.
Mark.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much,
Good
Ziggy.
stream.
Well, it's
Thank
great
you.
to talk to you.
And I
Righty.
hope to see some epically crazy builds on
Ethically
release day.
crazy.
Yeah, awesome stuff.
Epic.
Hardwood.
Thanks very much for watching, folks.
It's exciting.
All right. Awesome. Thanks.
Bye, guys. Well, holy hell, that was the Path of Exile update Q&A. Filled with a lot of questions, answers, comments, concerns, and some complaints. I loved it, though. I think it was good. In comparison, I mean, we just watched the campfire. That had me way more hype. Hype! Feel you hype! Feel you hype! Affliction hype! Affliction hype! Alright, let's go, let's go!